Hi everybody, I'm Den Haring and welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. Today we're going to go into a little bit of a deeper dive when it comes to maintaining bait casting reels. We did a video not too long ago where we showed some very basic maintenance of the reel where we didn't really take the reel apart very much. We took the side piece off, the side plate here off. We took a few items apart here, but today we're actually going to open up the reel so that you can see the gearing and the components inside, and we're going to show you how we do the maintenance of a bait caster that way. And the way we'll do that is we'll have the camera on the side of me or over the shoulder so that you can see the items more closely. And that will allow me, during editing, if I need to zero in on some of the smaller components so that you can see what we're doing a little better. So let's get started. Okay, so we have our bait caster here, and it's important to know that I've already taken the spool out of this and cleaned it thoroughly. So what I did was I took a warm washcloth with warm water and I just wiped everything down. And then, like we spoke about in the video, we used a couple of tools. We use this special toothpick with this fiber brush on it, and that is allowing to get into these very small corner areas that are hard to get into otherwise, like areas in here. And so what we did was we just used this brush, and it helps get the dirt off so that you can keep your reels good and clean. And that's what we did with this one. So this is going to start with, you're going to need something to hold the different components. And so I've got this little tackle storage box, and we're just going to put the components in here in a particular order, and then we'll just reverse that order when we want to put everything back together again. So it's kind of like reverse engineering with the reel. So the first thing is to take that side plate off. We just press this down, turn the knob, and that just pops right off. We're going to place that here. The next thing is to pull the spool out, and now you'll get a closer look at these magnets. So this is a Fluger Try-On reel. It's a pretty common bait caster, and a lot of bait casters are configured just like this one. And part of that configuration is to have these centrifugal brakes, which actually are magnetic, and they slow the spool's rotation down, especially towards the end of the cast. And so that helps control the spool and stops you from getting backlashes so easily. And so the brake is engaged when these little red pieces here are away from the center of the center pin of the spool. So you can see I've got this one engaged and the one opposite to it engaged. And that's what you want. If you're going to engage them, you want them to oppose each other. The other four, I have them disengaged. They are already clicked. They click in place, and they're towards that center pin. The ones that are outwards are the ones that's going to apply the centrifugal brake onto the spool. I don't like to engage all of them because I think that just makes it harder to cast. I do keep two engaged, and that's just how I like to set up my reels. So we'll put that in there. Then we're going to start taking the reel apart itself. So we'll start with getting our Phillips screwdriver here, and we're going to take this screw off. And this will allow us to get to the nut that holds this handle in place. So there we go. We'll pull that up. I'm just going to put it right here. I still know that the order is going straight across, so I should be good. Then a lot of reels come with wrenches like this. So these wrenches are meant to fit on that nut, that size. And so we just loosen it up, and we're going to take this nut off. Put that in there like so. We're going to pull the handle off. The first thing I like to do with that is just wipe it down. You can see it's got some grime on it just from the usage. This is actually ground in, where it's not grime, it's just some of the plating has come off of the metal here. So it's not dirt, it's just some of the plating's come off. It's just surface only. It has nothing to do with the function of the handle. So we'll put that in here. There we go. And then the next part here will be there's a clip here. This will come off. Put that here. This is the star drag mechanism. It's still set pretty tight. I should have loosened that at the end of the season, but I didn't. So we're just going to unscrew the drag here. So that comes off simply enough. And then there's a few washers here that we'll take off. Just pull all of those off. There's actually 2 washers. You can see the 2 washers here and this little ring. And usually what I'll do is I'll keep them the way they came off, but I will wipe them down. Sometimes they get a little grime on them. But these are clean, so that's a good sign. It means the reel is pretty good and tight still. There's not a lot of dirt getting inside. Okay, so now we have it broken down to just where we have the handle off, the star drag mechanism is off, and then it takes 3 screws to get this side plate off, but that's about as far as we're going to go. We're going to take this side plate off and check it. We're going to look at everything inside, make sure everything's good. I already know that this spring mechanism works because it clicks and I can disengage it. And also the anti-reverse, the infinite anti-reverse, stops me from being able to reel backwards. So that's working well. So let's take this side plate off and we'll see what we have. Got it. So now that I got that loose, I could probably use this Phillips again. Yeah, gotta watch. Just gotta be careful that you don't strip these screws. You know, the head of them. It's easy to do. They're small. They're not very large. We'll take the second one out. So there's 2 on the side on this reel. One here and one where I'm screwing out right now. We'll get that one out of here. And then there's a 3rd screw on the inside. We'll show you that in a minute. See if I can pop this out. There we go. Those 2 are the same size. This one's going to be a bigger one inside here. But there's a screw inside here, and we're going to be taking that out next. And when you do this, you want to make sure you're holding this side plate onto the reel, because if you don't, it could fall off. And there's gears and some other parts that are going to fall out on you. And unless you're familiar with how that reel goes together, you're going to have a mess. So you don't want that to happen. So I'm careful to make sure that I'm holding that in place while I loosen this screw here. Continue to loosen it. There we go. And there, it came out that way. So you can see that's a bigger screw. So that bigger screw goes inside here. All right, now we're ready to take this side plate off, and we want to do this carefully because there's springs and there's gears, and we don't want them to come flying off in any way. So here we go. So here we go. It's just going to come right up and off. And so now we've got the side plate off, and you can see how complex these reels can be. There's a lot of moving parts in here. You know, compared to a spinning reel, these are much more complex, and we'll get into that at the end of the video, why that is. So anyway, so we got the side plate off, but there's a piece in here that's going to come out, right? It's this little piece that holds the handle, and this usually gets some grime on it, so we're going to want to clean it. So I'm just going to wipe it down and clean it real good. I'm just going to stand it up here. And then the side plate itself, this inside here is where the bearings are. There's some bearings in here, and this is what allows this to turn so freely. Because on a baitcaster, when you click that button and you throw your lure out, when you're casting your lure, the spool actually spins. And so that spinning is important. You want that to spin very freely so that you can make a long cast. But what I'm going to do here is just going to take my paper towel and just force it right through here. And this just collect any of the grime that might be in there. You can see I'm getting some grime on here, a little bit of dirt. Not too bad, there's some here. But so overall though, very happy with how clean that looks. I do have a little dirt in here that I want to get out now that I can get to it. And this brush does a great job at getting that out. So you can see there, I got some of that out and it looks much cleaner. Okay, so now I'm going to carefully inspect this reel. So the first thing I'm looking for are these 2 springs right here. They're used as a cushion to hold everything together. And when you take this side plate off, it's very easy for these springs to stick on here or pop out. So I want to make sure they're on there. I'm not going to move them or play with them. I don't have to. This is looking very good to me. This thing is very clean. It's not dirty at all. So I don't have to break this down any further. If I was to do that, I'd just be adding risk to ruining a part or losing a part, and there's no need for that. So I'm just going to observe everything here. A better word for that is to inspect everything to make sure everything looks good. So there's some, right away we'll notice there's some gears here, and they have some grease on them. And what I like to do is, I like to take the grease off of them. So I'm just going to wipe the grease off on these gears, and I'm going to put new grease on. So I'm just turning the gear and wiping it off with my paper towel as carefully as I can so that I don't lose, because these gears, they'll just come right, you can see I'm lifting this one up right here, it'll just come off if I lift on it, but I have no need to take it out. It's not dirty. You can see that's just the grease there. It's not in any way, shape, or form dysfunctional in any way. It looks fine. And there's a little grease on this gear down here underneath here too. So I'm going to take that off. That's a little bit older and uglier grease. So we'll take that off. And what we will do is just put some new grease on there. And in every case here, when we're doing oiling and lubrication and greasing of reels, less is more. You don't need too much. There's one spot where I use more oil than everywhere else, and I'll show you that near the end. But when it comes to grease, very little bit. As the old hair commercial used to say, a little dab will do you. So we'll put a little dab right here, and just one opposite here, and then one on this gear right here. So there, we just put some new grease on there. And at this point, there's nothing else that I want to lubricate inside here. So hopefully you can see this very clearly here. We got a lot of different gears. We got the springs here. There's nothing else that I need to do. This mechanism is good and clean. There's nothing broken or out of order on it. So I'm going to put the side plate back on. So we're going to actually start doing the reversal of this build. So one of the things that we can do right away is put this piece back on. If you remember, it was inside here. So we're just going to set that up. It only goes in one way. So we're just going to slide that right down here. There we go. And then we'll put the side plate back on, and we have to do this carefully because everything has to line up just right. If something doesn't feel like it's going on right, start over again. Don't force anything, because if you force it, something's going to break. So this went right back down. And the reason I know that's true is because you can see there's no gap in the seam here. So this is back down, everything's good. I'm ready to put that big screw in here and then the other two screws back. So we're going to do that right now. So we're just reinstalling everything in the opposite order that we took it off. So this reverse engineering idea again. So we'll tighten this screw up. And I take my reels apart to this degree probably once every 3 years. I do the basic maintenance yearly. And then after 3 years of use, if I'm using a particular reel a whole lot more, then I might do it sooner than 3 years. But for the usage that I have in my reels, I use a lot of rods and reels, and I use them such that I don't use any one all the time. And so over time, a lot of these reels don't get used as hard as they might if it was the only one that I had. And so that actually adds to the longevity of the reel. So let's put this screw back on here. But like I was saying, every 3 years or so, I'll open it up and take a look inside. And if there's something broken, a spring missing or something, I'll try and replace that, either with spare parts from other reels, because I have old junk reels that I no longer use, and I use them for spare parts. Or maybe sometimes I'll have to get online and purchase a part. But if you do these, just this simple thing you're watching me do today, and it's not complicated, it really isn't. Just this, once a year, your reels will last long. This Tryon here is well over 10 years old, and it still works flawlessly. There's no reason to have to feel that I need to replace it, because it works. There's nothing wrong with it. And so from my point of view, the money that I could be spending on a new reel here, I could put towards tackle or something else. Now, you know, I do like to get some new reels now and then, you know, with the latest technology and all that. But this reel works great. I use it on a 6.5 foot rod for topwater lures and square bill crankbaits, and it's perfect for that application. Okay, so then we're going to put these washers back on, and they only go on one way too, so I need to get them separated so that I can get them on here. There's one, there's two, and then this ring goes on here. The next part is our star drag mechanism. It just screws on here. You got to get it on straight though, and I failed to do that properly, so let's try this again. Now we got it. See, and if, you know, you don't want to force anything. You just want to make sure that everything's going on the way it should. Now even this, I don't want to tighten it. You know, I'm just going to tighten it so that it's all the way down, not so that it's like, I'm not trying to make it real tight or anything like that at this point. This spring piece goes over this. This is like a little clip. So we'll put the, if I can just get it on there, we'll put the clip on here, and then the handle. There we go. And then this holds the handle on. There's a little screw in there. Oops, I forgot the nut. Where's the nut? Oh, there it is. It's right in front of my nose. Okay, so back to the handle here. That's some funny stuff. All right, so now we're going to put the nut on here. This is just the retaining nut that holds the handle on. And even this, we're going to tighten it, but not a ton. We don't want it over tightened. There's no reason to. The purpose of this nut is just to hold this on, but then the nut is held in place by this end cap piece right here. So we'll tighten this up. Now you have to, this is one thing you should realize, we want to tighten this just so that it's fairly snug there. But then you want to make sure that when you put this piece on, that the holes line up, because it won't in every case. Now this just happens to line up perfectly as I put it on there, but sometimes you might be in a position where this nut is turned to the point where it might not line up with that little hole, and it needs to, because that's where the screw's going in. So I was able to get it right the first time. I just locked it down to where it's snug, and that goes straight on there, and I can see the hole. So now it's just a simple thing to put this screw in there and hold it in place. So now we put the screw on. There we go, and that's good. So now you can see I can loosen this drag up, or I can tighten it. So it was already all the way loose. This is actually tightening the drag on that spool right now. So I can feel that it's working, and we can test it when we put the spool in. But before we do that, now we're going to do some lubrication. Okay, so there's one item here that requires a little bit of grease, and there's nothing on it. So we're going to put some grease on here. Again, just a little dab will do you. Perfect. All right, so we got that. Hopefully you can see that. And then we're going to do some oiling. So the next thing I do is I'm going to put a drop of oil right down into here. And the way I like to do that is to use a toothpick, because it gets it down in there for me that much easier. So I have a little real oil here. This is from Abu Garcia high-speed oil. Good stuff. And actually I could probably just put it in, because this has a narrow tube. I'm just going to point it in there and squeeze one drop in. I only want one drop. I don't want much. So one drop, and we'll exercise this a little bit. Now I also want to drop in the side plate. So I'm going to just put a little drop right in here. And there it is. So now that is good. We're ready to put our spool in. Now if you remember, I said last time, you know, it's a good idea to just put some tape on your spool so your line don't go all over the place. That's just that's just backing. That's monofilament backing. I'll be putting braid on that later on. So we put the spool back in because the magnets are set the way I want them. 2 are engaged, 4 are not. And then we'll put the side plate on. And that's just a matter of pressing this down and turning it so that it locks in place. We'll see how it feels. I can feel that you can see the drag is so loose right now that the spool won't turn. But if I tighten that drag up a little bit, then the spool turns. So you can see that the drag mechanism is working, and now it'd be actually hard to turn that because I've tightened it up more. I like to keep the drag somewhat loose until I actually have my fishing application, and then I'll set it the way I want it. And the same thing here. When this is the spool tension control knob, I make that tight on purpose so that the line won't come off this reel so easily. I want it tight. When I'm putting on my my braid, I want it to go on there tightly, so I make this spool very tight so it doesn't overturn or overrun very easily. And then after I have my line set up and the reel on my rod, then and my lure on the end of the line, then I can set this spool tension control so that that lure just drops nice and easily to the floor, and that's how I know I have this set up for good casting. So this is looking good. Now the next step for us, I want to tighten that a little bit, is 2 more oil points. And this is where I use a little more oil. It's on the worm gear here. It's inside here. I want to make sure that I get a decent amount of oil. Oh, actually, before I do that, I like to wipe it clean. So I'll take a towel and just reach in there and look at it. I'm usually looking for dirt. You can see that's nice and clean. There's just a little bit of grime, very little. So that's a good sign. Sometimes if you're this reel application, I usually fish in open water, top water like I mentioned. But other applications, if I was taking a reel, like I have other reels that I use for fishing in slop, lily pads, milfoil, and all that, and because of those weeds, or some of those weeds will get on your line, they'll actually get in the reel. Those reels tend to grime up a lot more because they're collecting that stuff. So when you do this with those, you'll end up getting more stuff off, and it's important to clean that. So now we're just going to take the oil and we're going to put some in there. We're going to turn this. We're going to put some in the other side, just another couple of drops, and I'm using 3-4 drops there, maybe 5, and then I just want to exercise that by turning the reel handle several times, or actually dozens of times, because that'll just get that oil in there. Now you don't want to put way too much oil in there, because anytime you use too much oil, it just becomes a grime collector. In other words, it no longer is lubricating. It can't, too much oil doesn't add to the lubrication. It just adds to collecting dirt. So just a little lubrication is all you need to make all the parts move the way you want them to. And then finally, I did this in the other video, I like to put a little bit of oil on the for the reel handles, and I'll use a toothpick to get in here because the gap here is very narrow. So what I'll do is I'll pull the handle out as far as I can, and I'll take a toothpick and I'll let the oil run down that toothpick and right down in there, and I'll just spin that handle some, and I'll do the same thing with the other handle, same exact procedure. That went down in there, I believe, just in case it didn't. Yeah, that certainly did. And we'll exercise that. I just like those things to turn freely. I don't like when it just doesn't feel right when they start getting bound up. So we'll keep that turning nice and freely. You can see that's doing a good job there. There is one thing I do after I do that, and that is I just take a paper towel. So I'll just take a paper towel and get it in here and just get the excess oil out of that crease, because all you need is just a little lubrication. And here's doing it again on the other side, and you will know that you get it because it'll get wet on the end of that towel if that oil collects on there. Got it. So all right, this one's basically ready to put on a rod and ready for us to put our line on there, which for this reel will be 20-pound test. What I like to use is spider wire braid, and then I'll put either, depending on my application, I'll put a mono or a floral leader on top of that. But feels good. This one's ready to rock and roll. So a little bit more about bait casting reels. These used to be very simple reels also. Overall, the spinning reel is a simpler reel than a Baitcaster today. And but back in the 1960s, these reels were quite simple too. But they weren't very popular then because they were so simple. It was easy to backlash and get all kinds of tangles. And it all has to do with this spool having to rotate when the line is going out. In contrast, when you cast a spinning reel, this spool doesn't turn at all. The line is just coming off of the spool. And then the only time the spool turns is, well, actually the spool never turns. The only time there's any movement is the line is drawn over this piece here, and that actually winds the line back onto the spool. So the spool never moves on a spinning reel. It's a really interesting concept, the spinning reel, but a very simple one, and yet very effective. So out of the two reels, I actually prefer the Baitcaster, and there's two reasons for that. One is this is what I started out using somewhere around 1968 or so when I was a very young boy. And so I learned the hard way, because back then these reels were difficult to use. They didn't look anything like this. And, you had to educate your thumb on how to cast without getting all kinds of tangles. Fast forward the clock 50 years, and now we've got some of the, these baitcast reels are actually space aged in their materials. I'll give you a good example. There's this baitcast reel made by Shimano, the Shimano Metanium. My dad bought one about a year ago. That thing is space aged when you take a look at the components on it and how they're made from certain alloys, and there may be some titanium involved, and then the precise gearing of the reel, the precision of the build of the reel is fantastic. Now that Metanium will also set you back $420, but it's a heck of a reel. And so that's why baitcasters are this is why I prefer these in today's world too, and it's because I can cast very accurately with these. So now that they've solved the problem by using brakes, magnetic brakes, centrifugal brakes, they've solved the issues with making it very easy to backlash. So it's much easier to use these reels today with all the settings on them, and so it's just a more accurate reel to cast with. But that doesn't mean there's not a time and a place for a spinning reel, because this reel is just as important when it comes to light lures. These reels don't do so well with anything that's less than 1/4 of an ounce. That's when you start getting into these. And these reels, the spinning reels, you can go down to 1/8 of an ounce, 1/32 of an ounce, and still be able to effectively cast those light baits on a spinning reel. So spinning reels definitely have their applications. And that's what we're going to do in the next video, is show you how to simply maintain a spinning reel. So stay tuned for that. That video will be coming out very soon. In the meantime, if you have any questions, make sure you put those questions in the comments section of the video. Remember to hit the like button if you like the video. Subscribe to my channel. Always, we're certified Bassified. And as always, may God bless your fishing endeavors.